The frosting hadn't even melted. I'd barely blown out the candles when Kellen rose to his feet, glass in hand, voice sharp enough to slice the silence. "As of today," he said, "this house belongs to me. Mom, you need to leave." Laughter died mid-breath. Forks clinked against plates, then stilled. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Even the string lights above the patio seemed dim. Belle leaned back in her chair, the corner of her mouth curled into a smug little crescent. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. That smirk was for the room. I set my fork down. It didn't clatter. I stood slowly, deliberately pressing my hands against the table, as if grounding myself against the earthquake erupting in front of me. Outside, beyond the screen door, the wind stirred the hedges. A car passed on the street, then nothing. Kellen swirled the wine in his glass like it was a victory toast. "You've had a good run here, Mom, but it's time." My gaze moved from him to Belle, then around the table to the neighbors, invited under the pretense of a warm birthday dinner. Their eyes darted between us. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. Except me. I inhaled deeply, nodded once, and turned toward the hallway. Each step felt rehearsed. At the back door, I opened it halfway, leaned out and gave a single nod. Laura, my lawyer, stepped in. She didn't wear a suit, just a clean blouse, slacks, and a folder in hand. Silent, composed, deadly. The moment she crossed the threshold, Belle's smirk faltered. "This house," Laura said, her voice calm but cutting, "remains under the legal ownership of Billy Tressler. Any claims to the contrary are invalid and if pursued further could constitute fraud and criminal trespass." The folder opened, a crisp notarized deed untouched by Kellen's hands. Kellen opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. I just stood there, watching it all unfold, because the fight had already begun. It was supposed to be temporary. Kellen and Belle moved in after Harold passed. Just for a few months, they said, until they found their footing. I was still trying to breathe through the silence of a house without his voice, so I welcomed the noise, even if it came with their suitcases. At first, it felt like healing. Kellen made coffee in the mornings. Belle offered to help with dinner. They brought laughter back into the kitchen, filled the empty chairs at the table. But the months stretched. Seasons changed. They never left. The mortgage remained in my name. The bills came to my account and I paid them, every single one. But piece by piece, the house shifted. My furniture was rearranged. The guest room became their office, then their wellness corner. One day, I came home and found my grandmother's china boxed up to make space for Belle's minimalist plates. I told myself it was small things, harmless, normal maybe. Then they started inviting people over without asking. Game nights, dinner parties, loud friends who left red wine stains on my white tablecloth. Once, I opened the door to find a delivery of groceries I hadn't ordered. All vegan, all charged to my card. I still cook Sunday dinner. I still folded Kellen's laundry when he left it on the dryer. I still remembered Belle's tea preference. I told myself this was love, this was family. But one afternoon, I was weeding the front garden when I heard her voice, Belle laughing with the neighbor across the fence. "We're basically running the place now." The words clung to me like sweat in the summer sun. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, dirt under my nails, heart thudding in my ears. Later that night, I washed the dishes while they watched a movie in the den. Kellen had his feet on the coffee table I'd bought the year he was born. Belle sipped wine from one of the glasses I'd saved for special occasions. I thought family was forever. I thought helping meant love. But as I stood alone in the kitchen, drawing a plate that no longer felt like mine, something shifted. It was a Wednesday morning, quiet still. I came downstairs to the smell of coffee, but not mine. Kellen was at the dining table, sifting through a stack of mail. He didn't notice me at first. When he did, he gave a tight smile. "Just sorting the bills," he said. The problem was, only 2 of those envelopes had his name on them. The rest were mine. I said nothing, just nodded, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup. The air felt heavier than usual, like something unsaid was pushing against the walls. Later that afternoon, I walked in from the garden and found Belle at the counter. My property folder open, phone in hand. The pages inside weren't random. She was taking photos of the deed. She didn't flinch when she saw me. "Relax, Billy," she said, slipping her phone into her pocket. "We're just organizing the refinance. You'll thank us later. The interest rates are better now." Her smile was too polished, her tone too sweet. I forced a laugh, pretending to believe her, pretending not to notice the way she quickly closed the folder and slid it under the fruit bowl. But that night I didn't sleep. Instead, I pulled the deed from its hiding spot in my closet, where Harold and I had always kept our important papers, and drove to the bank the next morning. I asked for a safety deposit box, handed over the folder, and watched them lock it away behind steel and code. When I returned home, Kellen was at work, and Belle was in the backyard talking on the phone. I sat at the kitchen table, opened a fresh notebook, and began writing everything down. What mail Kellen was reading, what papers Belle touched, what words they used when they thought I wasn't really listening. Every detail. I didn't know exactly what they were planning, but I knew the signs of a story being rewritten, and I was going to make sure mine stayed intact. The cemetery was quiet, except for the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I traced the path to Harold's headstone, a route I could have walked blindfolded. Kneeling, I brushed fallen leaves from the granite, my fingers lingering over his name. For a moment, I let the cool stone anchor me. I spoke softly, the way I always did. "You'd be 70 today," I whispered. "You'd know what to do." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back to that last night in hospice, his hand cold but steady in mine. "But take care of our son," he'd said, his voice no more than a breath, "but not at the cost of yourself." Even then, he'd known the line between sacrifice and surrender. I had promised him, and now standing here, I wondered if I'd already broken that promise. Harold always sensed something in Kellen that I didn't want to see, a quiet resentment of my independence, my insistence on keeping the house in my name. "Don't let him think you're weak," Harold had warned me once. "Love him, but stay firm." I thought firmness and love could live together. I thought I'd raised a son who understood both. Back at home, the house felt different. The hallway smelled of unfamiliar perfume. On the kitchen counter lay the guest list for my upcoming birthday dinner. I picked it up, scanning the names. Old friends who had shared decades with me, gone. New names I didn't recognize, added in Belle's handwriting, looped across the paper like ivy. My eyes caught on a note in the margin. "Use main dining room for announcement." I set the paper down slowly, feeling the weight of Harold's warning like a hand on my shoulder. The air in the house was still, but it no longer felt like mine. Upstairs, footsteps moved. Light, quick, as if someone were rearranging more than furniture. I folded the guest list and slipped it into my notebook, then reached for my phone to call Monica. Monica brought the coffee just like she always did. One cup dark and hot for her, one light with cream for me. We sat on the back porch, the morning sun slanting through the trees, a false kind of peace hanging in the air. She could always read my face. "You're not sleeping," she said before I even spoke. "I haven't told you everything," I replied, my voice quiet. I told her everything. About the mail Kellen opened without asking, about Belle taking pictures of the deed, about the guest list for my birthday dinner, how it felt like they were preparing something, not celebrating. I even admitted that I'd started documenting things, hiding originals, keeping notes. Saying it all aloud made it feel heavier somehow, more real. Monica didn't flinch. "You need to talk to someone," she said. "A lawyer." I shook my head, unsure. "It's not that easy." She leaned forward, her voice firm. "Don't wait for them to act. They already are." Her words echoed through me long after she left. That evening, after I cleaned the kitchen and turned off the porch lights, I passed Kellen's office. The door was cracked open. He'd left his laptop running. Maybe I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The screen showed a folder labeled Property. Inside it, a PDF, Transfer Ownership MEA Bowen.pdf. I clicked. It was a form, one of those official property transfer documents. My name was spelled wrong, Mia instead of Billy. A small detail, but it screamed carelessness, or maybe arrogance. The signature lines were empty, but the date on the document stopped my breath. Next week. Not a vague plan, a scheduled move. I backed away from the computer, my hands cold. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't an accident. They were already preparing to cut me out. Upstairs, I could hear them laughing. Kellen and Belle in their room, unaware that I had just seen their blueprint. I walked back down the hall, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my journal. This time I didn't just take notes. I made a list of questions to ask the lawyer. I called the number Monica had scribbled on a napkin, my hands shaking as I held the phone. Laura Dean answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, steady, like someone who had seen storms before. I explained everything as clearly as I could. The mail, the photos of the deed, the transfer document with my name misspelled, the date circled on the screen. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief pause before she spoke. "Billy," she said. Her tone clipped, but not unkind. They can't do anything without your signature. But if they're already preparing a transfer form, and if that form ends up at a registry office with your forged name on it, that's a felony. We're going to build a wall of proof before they even try." Her confidence steadied me. She told me exactly what to gather: clear photos of any documents left in common spaces, copies of my bank statements showing I paid the mortgage, a written timeline of every incident, and if possible, surveillance from my own porch camera. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open and a small stack of printed screenshots beside me. I wrote dates, times, phrases they'd used, even the tone of their voices. Every detail became a thread I could pull later. At midnight, I walked outside barefoot and angled my porch camera toward the driveway where Belle liked to take phone calls. I replaced the old memory card with a new one and slid the full card into a labeled envelope. It wasn't rage driving me anymore, but something colder, clearer. For the first time since Harold died, I felt like I was making decisions with him in the room, quietly, firmly. By the end of the week, Laura had everything she needed to start a file. We agreed to keep it sealed until the day of my birthday dinner. I hung up the phone, closed my notebook, and listened to the faint sound of Belle's laughter upstairs as I drafted the guest list in my own handwriting. I told them I wanted something small, just a dinner with close friends, a quiet way to mark another year. Of course, Belle rolled her eyes and took over immediately, and Kellen agreed without even looking at me. "We'll handle it, Mom," he said, already tapping on his phone. I just smiled and let them. They thought they were planning a performance. What they didn't realize was that I had written the final scene. For the next week, I kept quiet as they made arrangements. They changed the menu twice. Belle ordered a custom cake with no chocolate because she's allergic, even though it was my birthday. And when the guest list ballooned from 8 to 18, I didn't flinch. I knew what they were doing. They wanted witnesses and audience. 2 days before the dinner, I noticed my jewelry box was in a different drawer, neater than I'd left it. The emerald brooch my husband gave me for our anniversary was missing. I found it hours later, sitting on Kellen's desk next to an open envelope from an appraisal company. I said nothing. The next morning, I found my passport tucked into the side pocket of his gym bag. That was the last straw. I called Laura and told her to be ready. We had the deed, the notarized documents, and a timeline airtight enough to hold up against any lie they might try to tell. She agreed to wait at the side gate 10 minutes before dinner began. On the night of the dinner, I wore my mother's old gold earrings and set the table myself. Belle barely looked at me, too busy arranging the seating chart. I made sure Monica sat to my right. She poured the wine. I folded my napkin. Kellen cleared his throat, lifting his glass, already smug. They thought I was handing over the house. They had no idea I was taking back everything. Kellen's voice cut through the room like a blade. "She's old," he said, as if I weren't sitting right there. "She doesn't even use the upstairs anymore. We've taken care of her for years. It's time." A few guests shifted in their chairs. Belle rested a smug hand on his shoulder, as if she were proud of the performance. I didn't move right away. I let the silence stretch, let their confidence swell for just one more breath. Then I stood, calm, certain. "I'm glad you said that out loud," I said, setting down my linen napkin. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I walked to the side table near the hallway where I had placed a small folder earlier. I opened it carefully, slowly, like slicing through years of pretense. Then I held it up, just high enough for everyone to see the county seal and notarized stamp. "This," I said, "is the original deed, still in my name, verified, untouched." Kellen's face dropped. Belle sat back in her chair, her eyes darting toward the door. I turned toward the sliding door behind me and gave a small nod. The door opened, and Laura stepped inside, calm, crisp, holding her briefcase like it was a sword. The chatter stopped cold. "I'm Billy's legal counsel," she said to the room, "and I'm here to make something very clear." Kellen's mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Laura unfolded a document from her case. "There is no transfer of ownership. The forged draft we found is a felony in this state, and as of this moment," she looked directly at Kellen and Belle, "you are trespassing." A neighbor gasped. My best friend, Monica, didn't speak. She just reached for my hand under the table. Kellen stood frozen. Belle's smirk had vanished. The weight of what they had done, what they had tried to take, had finally hit them. And I didn't gloat, I didn't yell, I just watched the lie fall apart at their feet. Then I turned to Laura and said, "Let's proceed with the rest." They didn't leave quietly. Belle shrieked, knocking over a water glass on her way out. "You think you've won?" This was supposed to be our house, she spat, clutching her designer bag like it could shield her from the truth. Kellen didn't meet my eyes. He muttered something about a lawyer, about his rights, about how I had set them up. But he didn't stop to argue. He didn't fight for the lie. He just followed her out, shoulders hunched, the silence behind them heavier than any scream. The neighbors didn't say much as they trickled out, but their eyes did, some wide with shock, others narrowed in quiet judgment. Monica stayed behind, helping me clear plates no one had touched. They told everyone they were the owners, she whispered as she gathered the unused silverware. It's going to sting. It did, but not for me. A week later, a letter arrived tucked in a simple white envelope. I almost didn't open it, but the handwriting was familiar. Benji Carter, Kellen's friend since they were in 3rd grade. Inside, a short note. Billy, I'm sorry for not speaking up. I should have. I saw what they were doing and convinced myself it wasn't my place. It was. You were always kind to me. I should have been braver. Benji. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I keep things that matter. Not valuable things, meaningful ones. Upstairs, Kellen's old room was quiet. He hadn't come back for any of it. His books, a guitar he never quite learned, boxes of paperwork left under the bed. I packed it all and scheduled a pickup with the local women's shelter. They said someone would appreciate it. The next morning, I walked into the guest room and opened the curtains wide. The walls were still pale green, but I saw something new. A crib could fit by the window, a bookshelf in the corner, a place where laughter could return without conditions. By the end of the week, I had already called the agency, not to ask if they had a child who needed me. I told them I finally had room. The soil was soft beneath my hands as I planted the last hydrangea by the porch. Blue ones this time, the kind Harold and I always said looked like summer in bloom. I brushed the dirt from my palms and sat back on my heels, watching the petals sway in the breeze. Monica appeared with 2 mugs of coffee. Thought you'd be out here. She handed me the warm cup and sat beside me on the step. We didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. The light shifted slowly across the lawn, touching everything with a golden glow. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter rang out. Monica's granddaughter, Leia, chasing butterflies near the rose bushes, her ponytail bouncing with every giggle. The sound curled around my chest, not painful this time, just full. Monica reached into her tote and pulled out a small envelope. I found this at the bookstore, she said. Didn't know why it made me think of you, but it did. I opened the card, simple lettering on the front. You are not alone. Inside, just her name and a short line in her handwriting. You didn't just protect your house, you reclaimed yourself. I held the card in my lap for a while, the silence between us wrapping around like a soft blanket. She was right. For years, I had confused holding peace with holding my tongue. Now peace came from finally speaking, even if only through action. The house was quiet again, but not empty. The walls no longer listened for betrayal. They breathed. The creak of the hallway no longer sounded like intrusion. It was simply the house settling into being mine again. Later, I walked through each room, not to check, just to feel. I touched the doorway where Harold once leaned, the kitchen counter where Kellen used to steal cookies as a boy. Those memories remained. The rest had been cleaned out like dust from a corner I'd ignored for too long. Upstairs, the guest room waited. A soft yellow blanket already folded over the crib rail, a storybook on the nightstand, and outside, the porch bloomed with no one left to steal the view. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing in the quiet. Not the hollow kind, but the kind that fills rather than empties. In the reflection of the window, the hydrangeas shimmered beneath the evening light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by what was lost. I felt grateful for what remained, and in that stillness, I could almost hear Harold's voice again, steady, certain, proud. You did good, Billy. I smiled, tracing my fingers along the window pane as the last rays of sunlight faded over the garden. The world outside kept moving, but for that moment, everything felt still. Not in mourning, not in fear, but in peace. True, unshakable peace, the kind that comes when you finally reclaim the space you were never meant to surrender. And for the first time since blowing out those birthday candles, I felt the quiet not as an ending, but as the beginning of something new.